Everyone. In discussions this week, we're going to kind of talk a little bit about primary research and actually conducting an interview. So, primary versus secondary research. I know a lot of you know this already because some of you have already taken the AP class, but primary research is research you have conducted yourself. It can include interviews, personal observations, experiments that you have completed and reported on the outcome. And also when you start doing research out in the real world, especially for 1020, which I think a lot of you might wind up taking in the fall potentially. Primary research is also when you go out and find materials that people have done firsthand, like they are the ones that have gone out and conducted the research. Secondary research is research that has been done by others that you are using as a source, such as news articles, textbook, academic papers, and so on. Sorry, hit the wrong button. So for this particular project, you are going to be conducting an interview, and there are a few things I just want you to consider as you start this process. One, make sure you're interviewing someone you feel comfortable interviewing. Come up with open-ended questions in order to foster conversation. Always be respectful of the person that you're interviewing. Very often, sometimes people will ask a question and someone's not comfortable answering it. You don't need to kind of poke and prod and try to make them answer it, because that's just going to kind of damage your own credibility in this process. Be prepared to allow the interview to go in a different direction. I always say writing is fluid, and the very same thing can happen with this particular genre, is that sometimes, like especially in an interview, the line of questioning can take a whole life of its own, and all of a sudden you wind up talking about something you weren't expecting. This happens a lot, I feel like, with grandparents. I can remember when I was little, I would start asking my grandparents questions about when they were younger, just because I wanted to learn more about their past and my family and the history and all that other fun stuff. And sometimes in that process, we would start talking about stuff that I wasn't anticipating talking about. And so we'd have these really, really cool conversations. And that ties into the next bullet point. Always allow yourself enough time to do the interview and construct your project, because sometimes an interview might take a while. Sometimes it might take more than one session of the two of you getting down and kind of hashing it out. So just kind of be prepared for that. So I do suggest that you come up with some questions beforehand. Again, if it kind of goes in a different direction, that's perfectly fine. But if you have your questions, it also makes it really easy to kind of get back into the path that you want it to go on. So before you even get started, you need to come up with these questions, and you have to think, okay, what specifically do I want to ask them about? Do I want to ask about their childhood? Do I want to ask about what their greatest accomplishment is? The best life advice you can give me. Really, as I mentioned in the introductory video for the class for this week, you can do whatever you want. But as you're making the questions, ask these open-ended ones. Tell me about your greatest accomplishment versus have you accomplished anything you're proud of? Because the second one, they can say, well, yeah, I graduated with a doctorate degree. Cool. But when you say, tell me about your greatest accomplishment, oh, then that just opens up a whole brand new direction there, where they can be like, oh, well, the first time I applied to get my doctorate, I got denied. And then I had to retake the GRE and go through all these hoops. And, I was really, really proud of eventually getting my doctorate. That's it just leads to a better story. What was it like growing up in the 1980s? Which I will tell you, it was awesome. Versus, was the 1980s really like Stranger Things? Because the second question, again, they can go, yeah, it was. Music spot on. But when you say, what was it like growing up in the 80s? They can say, oh, it was feral. We ran around and drank water out of a hose pipe, and our parents didn't know where we were half the time. That is partially true. But it just, again, better line of questioning. How did you decide on your college versus what college did you attend? I went to Tennessee Tech, but when you ask me, how did you decide on your college? Well, that's a deeper story. My brother was actually working on his master's degree at Tech, and I would go visit with him and stay with him on the weekends. And that's how I fell in love with Tennessee Tech, and that's why I decided to go there. How did you develop your relationship with your spouse versus was it love at first sight? What do you feel is the secret to happiness versus are you happy? What's the best piece of advice ever given to you versus were you given good life advice? So, again, just trying to think of these questions that will foster good conversation, more responses, maybe even open it up to more questions, kind of in the same line of thinking, is what you're going to be doing. So, there you go. So, in this project, you don't have to use direct quotes. You can if you want to, though. You can summarize. Summarizing takes a longer passage and breaks it down into a smaller one. So I give a good example there. I'll let you read that on your own. But as you're interviewing, my suggestion would be either to record it or write it down in the process, like take notes or whatever. But when you're actually constructing the project, as I said, that's one of the mistakes students make, is that they think that they have to write down every single word the person said, and you don't. You can easily summarize or paraphrase depending on what genre you're choosing to construct this interview project in. A lot of people do choose to do a PowerPoint for this particular one. And in that, it's super, super easy just to kind of do a copy paste job of the questions and answers, but I want you to give a little bit more than that. Maybe give a little bit of a commentary on what your thoughts were of their response. Just kind of give it that more personal touch. I'll be showing you some examples in class starting next week, but this week I just want you to be thinking about potential questions, and that's what you're going to be doing for this discussion board. You are going to be coming up with 5 what you feel like are good open-ended questions that you could ask a person that you're interviewing. And this is partially just to help you brainstorm, help your classmates brainstorm, and in your peer replies, I would just like for you to respond to some of these. I would like for you to actually answer one of the questions. So like if someone says, well, what's your favorite color and why? Tell them blue, because my children have, for me it's blue because my children have blue eyes, and so when I see the color blue it makes me think of them. So I would like for you to answer one of the questions and then critique the questions, just kind of giving some feedback going, yes, I think this is a good open-ended question, maybe this one needs a little bit of tweaking. And it's just so that way, if y'all are kind of stuck on coming up with questions, then you can go back to the discussion boards and go, oh, I remember so-and-so had some really, really good questions in that discussion board. I think I might use some of those. So that is going to be your discussions for this week. List 5 potential, in response to this prompt, 5 potential questions that you could possibly use in an interview, and you're not locked into them. These are just some brainstorming ideas. And then in your peer replies, again, reply to one of the questions like you were the one being asked it in an interview, and then critique the others, stating whether or not you think that they would be good to use on an interview project or not. So I look forward to see what y'all come up with, and have a little bit of fun with this week.